Thank you very much. We saw in your piece there Congressman Peter King. He is the ranking member of the Committee on Homeland Security. He joins us on the telephone from Washington, D.C. Congressman, we know you're upset. A lot of people are upset. My question to you, you've been in D.C. a long time. President Obama, was he personally involved in this decision? He manages a pretty big budget, trillions of dollars. This comes to, what, $40, $50, $60 million, something like that. Did he know about this?
Greg, he had to know. Fact is, yes, there are a lot of decisions that are made. There are a lot of lower-level decisions made. But something of this importance, which involves basically a war. We're having a war with Islamic terrorism. Has to be the number one priority, certainly domestically and even internationally. So an issue like this, yes, the president has to be aware. If he was not aware, then his staff failed him, and there's a lack of leadership coming from the White House. He should have made it absolutely clear that he would be hands-on when it came to a decision like this. If he didn't, then that's his responsibility.
Well, there's history here. I mean, the previous administration, as you know, we had problems. New York City had problems with the amount of funding we were receiving from the Bush administration. The Homeland Security Department wanted to basically de-emphasize such icons as the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building, saying that they weren't of national importance, something to that effect. So this has been going on for a while. What is it about Washington, D.C. that they don't understand about New York?
Well, first of all, in fairness, there was 1 year in 2006 where the money did go down, but the money had gone up very significantly under the Bush administration each of the years after that, and port security had gone up about 1,000% during those years. What is it, though, is that the further you get from New York, the further you get from September 11th, the rest of the country just looks upon this as another political issue. They look upon it as some historic event, September 11th, and they don't realize the imminence of it. They don't realize how this threat is with us day in and day out, and they just seem to block it off. And they are concerned about getting fire engines for their firehouse out west, or getting the latest police equipment for a police department in some western state that will not be attacked in a million years. It's just really there's absolutely no excuse for it. It's just a real lack of focus by too many people in Washington, in Congress, but especially in the administration. And also these often are accounting decisions. It's a balance sheet decision, right, and they don't make any difference between Homeland Security and a agriculture product.
I do remember specifically, though, in 2008, New York City was upset about another funding decision, this one from the White House, this one from the Bush administration. It does seem to cross, other parties have done this to us before. Let me ask you this, Congressman. What can be done? Is this a done deal legislatively? Are there any remedies available to you to restore this funding?
Right now, all we can do is, and again, it's a Democratic administration, Democratic Congress, but I'd be working to do is with the Department of Homeland Security to ask them to put money into another program. For instance, next month we're getting money for the Urban Area Security Initiative. Put more money into that to try to compensate for at least somewhat for the losses we've suffered in port security and mass transit.
All right, Congressman Peter King, thank you very much.
Let's go to Vince Dementri. He's at the subway stop in Kew Gardens, Queens, with more on this puzzling decision. Vince?
Bit of a surprise and understatement. New York lawmakers absolutely stunned that just 11 days after that failed car bomb attempt, that the Department of Homeland Security is planning on cutting millions and millions of dollars of terrorism funding for the city of New York. Let's take a look at what we're talking about here. This is what we're talking about. According to state lawmakers, the Department of Homeland Security plans to cut funding for the transit security system by some 27% and the port security by 25%. New York Senior Senator Chuck Schumer released this statement, and in part it says this: for the administration, meaning the White House, to announce these cuts some 2 weeks after the attempted Times Square bombing shows they just don't get it and are not doing right by New York City on anti-terrorism funding. Now, Schumer not the only one who was outraged by it all. Junior Senator Kristen Gillibrand also livid, but absolutely just furious is Long Island Congressman Peter King, who said that before the car bombing, he had heard rumors that there were going to be cuts. But he said after the attempted car bombing, he said to himself, there's absolutely no way it's going to happen. But apparently it is going to happen. And we have learned this. Tomorrow, the president, Barack Obama, due in New York City, in one of his stops, one police plaza, police headquarters. You can bet he's going to be questioned about that. Reporting live here in the Union Turnpike Kew Gardens Square Station in Kew Gardens, Queens. I'm Vince Dementri, Pix 11 News.
Vince, let's talk right now about a secure
bombing attempt. And good evening, everyone. I'm Bill Ritter.
And I'm Liz Cho. Tomorrow, the Obama administration is expected to cut funding by a fourth for security for mass transit and ports in our area.
It is getting strong reaction, as you can imagine. Eyewitness News reporter Jeff Pegues in Times Square with our lead story tonight. Jeffrey.
And Bill, less than 2 weeks after the failed bombing attempt here, some consider this a slap in the face. And tonight, it has some of New York's congressional delegation fired up as well. Some of them offering a blistering critique of the Obama administration. Democrats.
We've seen in the last year that New York has become more of a target from new groups.
And Republicans.
These cuts by the Obama administration, the Department of Homeland Security, are absolutely indefensible.
Don't agree on much these days in Washington, but New York's delegation of lawmakers is on the same page when it comes to Homeland Security funding cuts. They just found out that the Obama administration has dropped the budget axe on some funds that beef up security on the city's trains and at the airports. Congressman Peter King says it's a bad idea.
It puts New York at risk, and it makes you wonder about how serious the Obama administration is about defending New York against Islamic terrorism.
Here's what's happening. Grants from Homeland Security to the MTA will be cut by 27%. That's down $42 million. And for the Port Authority, grants slashed by 25%, $11 million gone.
Please get out of the street.
The cuts come barely 2 weeks after the failed bombing attempt in Times Square. Exhibit A, some say, that New York has been and remains a target for terrorists. Senator Chuck Schumer says he wants the White House to reconsider.
And I'm hopeful that they will change their position, realize their mistake, and give us a greater percentage and a greater amount of dollars.
Some strap hangers we spoke with agree the cuts aren't a good idea.
That's too bad because it's quite important, especially in New York City subway system.
However, this man won't be losing any sleep.
I'm not concerned about the cut in funding, no.
The White House is getting hammered for cutting security funding to New York City. It is first at 10, and good evening. I'm Ernie Gadastis.
I'm Jerry Alexander, and that criticism is coming from both sides of the political aisle. These cuts coming less than 2 weeks after that Times Square bomb scare.
Fox 5's Antoine Lewis is live in Times Square with more on tonight's top story. Antoine.
Good evening, Ernie. Good evening, Derry. Senator Charles Schumer, the senior senator from New York, says that these cuts show the administration simply isn't doing right by the people of New York City.
Our NYPD does a great job, but New York City can't do this alone.
Absolutely unbelievable. It's disgraceful. It cannot be defended in any way.
Reaction from a portion of New York's Capitol Hill delegation to cuts in federal monies to keep New York safe. The Department of Homeland Security has reduced the amount of anti-terror funding it will give for subway and mass transit security by 28%, 25% for ports in the New York metropolitan area. A loss of about $50 million. Schumer says would have been money well spent.
Mainly, it puts in detection devices on our trains, subways, and commuter rail, so that no one can walk on the train with biological, chemical, nuclear, or explosive devices. At the ports, the number one focus is to prevent any nuclear devices from being loaded onto our ships.
News of the cuts comes roughly 2 weeks after the attempted bombing of Times Square. Just last week, Congressman King, along with Mayor Bloomberg and Police Commissioner Kelly, testified during a Senate hearing on the need for more federal aid as New York remains a repeated target of anti-American terrorism.
They're going to be sending money to Montana and South Dakota and Wyoming and states all over the country, and they just feel, I guess, they have to divide this money up, and they don't appreciate that we are the number one terror target.
Which perhaps begs the question of why that message isn't getting through to D.C.
I think at the highest levels of the White House, including the president, people are aware that we're the target. But it doesn't translate quickly enough over to the bureaucrats in OMB who prepare these formulas back in December.
This isn't money that's being wasted on political issues. This isn't money that's being wasted in any way at all. This is money to protect the lives of innocent New Yorkers.